I'm in the unenviable position of being the first speaker to request that you adopt a set of rules that you've been listening to 8 hours of testimony against, and I realize that. And I realize that those who testified this morning and throughout the day probably believe I have no standing to make this request. And so I apologize to those who my words might trigger and further traumatize in this matter. But as an employee of a state institution that has been empowered by a state statute and requested by state audit to move these rules forward, I come here today to do that. So I am here to request adoption of Chapter 20 through 26 Hawaii Administrative Rules entitled Public and Commercial Activities on Mauna Kea Lands. The now notorious state audit of 1998 listed many things that would improve the management of the Mauna. These audit findings led to the creation of the Office of Mauna Kea Management and listed rules as an important component to responsible management. The audit report recommended, quote, that the UH proceed with the development and implementation of rules and regulations for development and public access in the Summit and Halepahaku area. Every subsequent audit by the state has listed ways in which the University of Hawaii has improved its management, but kept making reference to the fact that rules still were needed. In August 2014, the audit stated, until UH adopts rules, it cannot enforce controls for managing public access nor implement certain actions called for in its own management plans, thus hampering its ability to fulfill its responsibility to protect the mountain's resources and ensure public health and safety on the mountain. It's important to note that the university did not actually have the authority to adopt rules until this was granted by the legislature in 2009. And when that statute was passed, one of the things it said was that access for traditional and customary Native Hawaiian culture and religious purposes shall be accommodated. And it's certainly not the intention of these rules to hamper cultural practice. While we realize some of the testimony here today has implied that there has not been sufficient collaboration or involvement with the Mauna Kea lands advisory bodies and community interests, I do note that there were 2 rounds of public hearings in September 2018 and June 2019, as well as opportunities for community input through various means.
This is the path that sort of led to where we are today. The audit in 1998 was when the state auditor said that we should adopt rules, the University of Hawaii, as part of its management for Mauna Kea. Drafting began in 2000, 2001. However, in order for an agency to draft rules, you need authority. And so that authority was granted by the legislature in 2009 after the university sought that authority to adopt those rules. What we included in the rules, specifically about Native Hawaiian traditional and customary rights, there aren't any rules, Hawaii administrative rules, that deal directly with customary rights and management of public lands. And so we looked, we worked with OHA again, that initial language, the community wasn't too supportive of it, so we took it out. But we have this constitutional right, constitutional requirement as an agency under Article 12, Section 7, dealing with traditional and customary rights. And so you see that there. And then so what we included was this language from the Sustainable Fisheries rules from BLNR, and that's under 2026-3 subsection F, which says that Native Hawaiian traditional and customary rights is recognized and protected under Article 12, Section 7 of the Hawaii State Constitution shall not be abridged, and so that's the reference there to that constitutional provision. For assemblies, we took out some of the language in the original that was overly broad, and folks had comments about the 10-person issue. So what we did was we took out most of that language, but what we left in is what is in the Forest Reserve rules. But instead of needing a permit like the Forest Reserve rules for persons of 10 groups of 10 or more, you need to just register. And the purpose of the registration from a management perspective is that more feet can cause more damage to sensitive areas. So it's really a conversation with the managers just so they know where you are, and if other groups are going up, they can advise you about that. And if there's sensitive areas they're looking at going, they can make you aware of that. I mean, if there's closed areas because of snow or something like that, they can let you know about it. So it's a registration instead of a permit. And so that was a big change from the Forest Reserve Rule requirements.
Okay, so all the permit applications for 10 or more people, not permit, but registration applications, they're going to be documented and they're going to be reported to who? In other words, somebody has to review what I assume would be the rangers or somebody else that is...
Yes, so currently ranger logs are all accessible, and those are reviewed by OMKM and by request by me or the president or the board. Many of those, the summaries of those logs are usually put in the annual report that's given by OMKM every year. So there will be access to those. And if you would like us to implement it in a different way, we certainly can do that.
I think I would like to see a policy at OMKM that somebody's going to be monitoring those registrations to make sure that misapplication of the rules is not occurring. And that if it is, we're going to get notified of that, because then
Yes.
it may be appropriate for a rule change at that point to modify it so that it doesn't occur.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can do that.
My reading of the rules is that a cultural practitioner going up doesn't have to register, doesn't have to check in with anybody. They have free access to the Mauna to practice culture. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Up to 10.
Correct. So could you clarify for me, if following Chair Kudo's example, if a hula halau has 12 folks and they go up to practice, they need a special use permit for that?
No, it's just registration. Yeah, it's not a whole permitting process, yeah.
I'm just struggling with why that's even there. If the answer is there are no or very little groups of 10 that are not Native Hawaiian practitioners, then I'm just struggling with why we would have a process for a group of people that I would feel have higher sensitivity for those high sensitive areas.
I feel like if the intention is to not infringe on cultural practice, we shouldn't infringe on cultural practice. This part of the rules troubles me too. That we mean we're going to honor all practice unless it surpasses some arbitrary number that we created.
It really is focused on the idea that the larger the group, the more the potential impact to the resource. This is one of those that is, I know, controversial, and some people feel that we're targeting certain kinds of activities, but in fact we're not. We're just saying that larger groups potentially have larger impacts, and so we would like to have the opportunity to sit down and discuss where you're going, when you want to go, how you're going to get there, et cetera, et cetera.
It's difficult to interpret administrative rules, and clearly listening to the testimony today, this is such a difficult thing that I don't want us to be having gray areas where people, feel that they're being, their rights are being taken away. It's not right.
I just don't see the real value to keeping that in place. It just seems to me, is what we've heard today, is that whether we go from 15 days to 24 hours, I still believe that people are still going to see that as restrictive. The mere fact that any registration is there at all. And again, if we're not talking about substantial number of groups that are doing that, I just don't see the
Or
value.
an alternative would be to exempt cultural practice from that limit.
That might create some legal issues. But
Discrimination issues?
Who else has a constitutional right to practice?
if you have a group of 50 go up, right,
Well, wouldn't that be solved by the fact that a cultural practice, by definition, would have to be sensitive to the environment? When we agreed to be hearings officers for these rules, one of the reasons I did it was so that I had to face the community head-on. I had to experience the trauma. And in the Hilo hearing, we were getting scolding, it was pretty heavy, and in the middle of it, I won't say her name, one of the folks testifying, before she testified, she came over and she just gave me a honey. Just gave me aloha. And then she went back. She was not any less ferocious. But she just took a moment to recognize, and a lot of folks before her did not do that. They made a lot of assumptions about my position, et cetera. And it was healing. I think the tone of the meeting changed, environment changed. We need more of those attitudes. A lot of folks call me by name because of the position I took in support of Kia'i publicly, which I appreciate, but I know that all of my colleagues care deeply about the Mauna and all of Hawaii. But when that story broke, the first two people who called me were astronomers who were pro-TMT. Not because they were angry, because they knew I was going to take a backlash from people who were pro-TMT, and they wanted to make sure I was okay. And they wanted to make sure that I knew that even though they maybe didn't support my position, that they cared about me personally, and they wanted to have a conversation. Can you tell me more about that position? I really don't understand why folks are so opposed, and it brought us together. I'm sharing those examples because I think, regardless of what side we're on, we gotta heal. How's it relate to the rules? These rules are not the issue. Other than they give UH a chance to continue to do right. I do believe that we've made great strides over the years, and a lot of the criticism we're taking doesn't recognize the improvements we've made, but we've got a ways to go. I think the rules will help us do that. But I'm really concerned, which is why I really appreciate Regent Higaki's firm point. Like, let's stop throwing roadblocks and barriers in the way of our cultural practitioners. Let's show them with our actions and our words that we value them, we value what they stand for, and we care, and we hear the trauma, and we're gonna start working to improve that. Thank you for letting me get on my soapbox for a minute.
Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, just add, I hear you fully, and we've all sat through the testimony. I know the community meetings had a lot of the same sentiment. This provision was never intended to be about cultural practices or cultural practitioners, but it's being received that way because of the lack of trust, as you say. So perhaps one way to address it is just have language in there referring to Section 3F and the protections afforded there. So that language about the constitutional protections, referencing 3F specifically there. Because it really, if it was a group of 12 Red Bull people, everybody would want this provision in there. Mm-hmm. And that's really what it was supposed to be about, is managing groups. And this has to do with safety, not just for the group, but also for our personnel. Because when you have large groups and multiple large groups, our rangers want to know so that they can staff appropriately, so that they can have the right people on the mountain at the right time. So I can suggest that as a minor modification because Section 3F already exists. So that's that constitutional language.
Are groups of 10 regardless still have to register in 15 days?
Yeah,
Even with
that'll
the provision in there?
Yeah, that'll still be in there. I think the suggestion is to highlight and reaffirm the fact that.
I can't support that.
The motion is to adopt the draft rules with an amendment to Section 20-26-62, which would replace that section with the following language. Any group larger than 10 members shall be required to sign in at Hale Puhaku or by another convenient means as designated by the president. Period.
You know, I think we heard all day today, the level of distrust, all of the comments, and as Regent Nahalia just stated, and stated previously, the rules are important, and I'm ready to support the rules. But I can't with this piece. And so I will be voting no should this motion be approved.
Okay.
If we really believe that our stewardship of Mauna Kea will improve with the rules, then I want that to be a unanimous vote, right? We're all going to get criticized. I'm going to get phone calls as soon as I walk out of this building, but I'm willing to take that fire if we're going to move forward. So I'm okay with Regent Higaki voting against the amendment, but if that means he's going to vote against the rules, I think it's time for us to be united in earning the trust back.
I would like to see the board be united in doing this. I don't think this is easy for anybody here.
Okay. So you withdraw your motion?
So I will withdraw my motion.
I withdraw the second. That the board approve the rules with the
Section 62,
Section 62 modification as
deleted.
deleted.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. The rules are passed with the deletion of Section 62. Thank you.
Thank you.